opening statement, and we'll go to some questions.
All righty. Good to see everybody. Everybody's got nice tans down here in Florida. It's good. Kind of an exciting time of the year. You know, I always say that in our sport, there's kind of check marks along the year of where you're at, and this is obviously one of them when it comes to spring meetings, to know that summer's right around the corner. We're getting back with our players and getting ready to go for the fall. So, like I said, it's good to see everybody.
Sark, there's going to be a lot of talk about college football playoff. I know you're going to learn more about
Yeah.
it hopefully in the next couple of days. Do you have some sense of, like, here's what you've been in a couple, of what you think should maybe be the right number, or what are the things when you enter that conversation, when you enter those conversations that are sort of on your mind to learn or maybe provide some feedback?
Yeah,
What those things should be like going forward?
I think, I've lived this life going all the way back to the early 2000s, right, when I was an assistant coach at USC, and we didn't have a playoff, and I think that I remember a year at SC, we had a great football team, and the way the computer spit it out in the end, I think LSU might have played Oklahoma, and we played Michigan in the Rose Bowl, and I think there were split champions that year. I think it was us and LSU were split champions, and then we grew into a 2-team playoff, and we grew into a 4-team playoff, and now we've grown into where we're at today. And I think at the end of the day, we all just want to put the best teams to have an opportunity to compete for a championship. And now more than ever, the length of the season, last year we played 16 games, and that was just to get to the semifinals. We would have been 17, right, to win a championship. And so the idea, I think we've all got to wrap our brain around. I don't know if we'll ever see an undefeated national champion again. If we do, that's a really good team because it's just so difficult. And it's difficult, yes, because of the quality of the opponents you play, but it's so difficult to stay healthy that long. I mean, you're going to have teams in years like we had last year where you lose your starting quarterback. And how do you respond to your quarterback being down? Or you lose both your left tackles. That happened to us last year. Or your left tackle, then your right tackle. And do you have the depth to endure? And so I think you're going to see teams more and more now, 2 losses, 3 losses, maybe even 4 losses that get in. Not very different than the NCAA baseball tournament of what that looks like. I looked at Vanderbilt, I think, as a number 1 seed. There was a point in the season they were 11-10, and now they're the number 1 seed in the baseball tournament. And so I don't know, and we kind of saw it in basketball this year with Florida and them winning the national title. This idea of somebody's going to go 16-0 in college football, man, put a statue up somewhere of that team, because I just don't know if that's going to happen again. And so the idea that I think the powers that be are trying to get it right, I think is a good, healthy discussion. And I understand not everybody's on the same page right now. Hopefully we can get to that point to where that is, that we're giving the best teams the opportunity to get into that playoff, because that's really what it is. It's a playoff. And you're rewarding teams that we've got a committee that's trying to say who are the best teams that should deserve an opportunity to compete for a national championship. And so we've got our conference championship. There's a regular season. We've had a playoff. We've had a championship game. What is that going to look like moving forward? Then there's the playoff. And so I don't know if I have all the answers. I'm excited to hear what are the talks, and where are we at. What I do know is from our perspective, this conference is really hard. The SEC is tough, and it's tough on every level. I think that this past spring, this 18 straight years, the SEC's had the most draft picks in the NFL draft. This year we broke the record with 79 draft picks going to the NFL draft. And so for year after year after year, the best players have been coming from the Southeastern Conference, and we love being part of it. But I surely don't want to punish our teams for playing quality opponents week in and week out, and then all of a sudden you look up and it's 2 years in a row the SEC hasn't had a team in the national championship game. That doesn't make sense all the time, right? And so we got to make sure that we've got enough opportunities to compete for national championship.
On the championship weekend idea, play-in weekend, as somebody that played in the championship game last year, any
Yeah.
thoughts on whether this is a good idea, bad
Well, I value the championship game weekend. Like I said, I've been in this conference. This is now going to be my 5th year. 3 as an assistant and now 2 as a head coach. And it means something to win an SEC championship. And anybody that tells you it's diminished, they're lying. It means a lot. It means a lot in our building, and I'm sure in everybody else's building, to those players. And so I think one of the challenges of that is, in a lot of other sports, they have a regular season champion and then they have a conference tournament champion. We don't have that in football. Last year we were a 7-1 team at the end of the regular season. I think Georgia was 6-2, and there was a few 6-2 teams. And then we played Georgia and we got beat, and Georgia was the conference champion last year. And so what is that going to look like moving forward? Are we just not going to have a conference champion? Or are we going to have a regular season champion and that's it? How is this all going to play out? But I also looked at it from our fans' perspective. That was a lot on our fans, to say, we're going to go to Atlanta and play a conference championship game. Then we had to play the first round of the playoffs, and then we had to go back to Atlanta for the Peach Bowl. Then we had to go to Dallas. And so you're putting a lot on fans to start to travel, different than in some of the other sports tournaments where they have, like this weekend in baseball, we got 4 teams coming to Austin that are all competing to get to a super regional and things of that nature. So I just think we've got to do a great job from a college football perspective to really look at it from every angle, and to say what's best for our sport, and to make sure that the quality of play is at the highest level, but also not taking it away from the student athletes, because they want to win a conference championship. The SEC, this is an amazing conference, and so to compete for one of those is incredible, but yet putting yourself in position to compete for a national championship is again a tremendous goal that all of us have going into every season. But I hope we don't lose that, because it does mean a lot. But again, we've got to be mindful of some of the other factors that this has. Everybody wants more teams. Everybody wants more games. TV wants more games. I get all that. But let's not lose sight of some of those things that we got into this sport for a long time ago that still mean a lot to a lot of us that are involved.
Steve, do you feel like team coaches are pretty united in wanting one transfer portal window, and that being January?
I don't know the exact timing of when that should be. I do think we're all in agreement that one transfer portal would be beneficial. Again, we're team builders. That's what we do, right? And it's hard to build a team when you've got 2 different portals and you're not sure who's on your team, who's coming, who's going, and you do your best to build a culture to where hopefully you can retain those players and bring in some good players. And again, we've all benefited from that. But I think if we can uniform that a little bit, at some point in spring, I think would be helpful. What that exact time is, I don't know yet. I do know from my perspective, for 2 years now, have been in the playoffs, the back-to-back years, that December portal window was brutal, where we had, I think, 9 guys go in and then 10 guys go in the next year while we were still playing in the college football playoffs. And that was very difficult. So I'm definitely an advocate for that portal being after the playoffs are done. But when in spring, when does that occur? I don't know yet.
Is May better?
I don't know, because you want to start building that team too, right? And May seems kind of late. Like I said, I think somewhere in spring is probably the right timing. What does that look like? Is that late January? Is that February? Is that March? I don't know. What does that exactly look like? And I haven't heard everybody's thoughts on that. And that's what these meetings are for, is to try to figure that out. That might spur some thoughts for me and maybe others of some feelings that I have on the issue.
Coach, you obviously have a really high-profile program. You coach a lot of great players, but I don't know, can you insulate a player these days? And just speaking on Arch, I mean, there's been so much publicity and build-up now to the role he's going to play. How do you manage that, or do you manage that? I know when Peyton was at Tennessee, I think he had some help with that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know if you can insulate it. Not anymore. I don't know if when Peyton was around, I don't know if there were cell phones and all those things, right? So it's a little different time and a little different era than what our guys operate in now. You guys all didn't have Twitter accounts back then either, and you didn't report instantaneously, and you didn't just retweet what the next guy wrote about, because that's kind of what you guys do now. That's fine, okay? But the idea of that for Arch, part of coming to the University of Texas is building that brand, is getting some of that exposure. And so, yes, do we support him as much as we can, like we do all of our players, but it's also a great platform for our guys. And so it's not all negative. There's a lot of positives to this. But at the end of the day, for a guy like Arch in this instance, I want to make sure that he enjoys this experience too, right? Here's lifelong dream, right, of being the starting quarterback at the University of Texas. Now it's his opportunity. I want to make sure that he has a great experience. Part of that is the exposure. Part of that is protecting him and putting some guardrails up on that so that he can enjoy the experience.
Steve,
Time for
when you
two last
built,
ones,
when you
guys.
built this program, I know you worked under Saban and you worked under Pete, but you also had a lot of conversations with NFL coaches. How important were those conversations in you doing what you do now, the OTA style scheduling and the way you're running it?
Yeah, we've definitely tried to. I've been fortunate. I think in our era of coaching, you could probably say, Nick Saban, Pete Carroll are two of the top 3, maybe 4 coaches in my era of a young coach growing up in our profession. And so I was very fortunate that way. So I've got, great experience that I definitely lean into. But I also think that we have to forever evolve, and we have to continually adapt to the new player, the new times, the new regiment, the new things that are put on our players' plates, and what's best for us. It's easy to do what you've done before. That's the easy thing to do, and sometimes it's more difficult to step outside of the box and to get a little bit uncomfortable and to maybe start to do things a little bit differently, having your team's best interest in mind. And that's what we've tried to do while we're here, all the while not losing sight of what's our foundation and what's our program built upon. And so we take a lot of pride in that of okay, where's college football headed? What does it look like in the NFL? And what are they doing now? And what does their product look like? And where do they feel like in the NFL they wish they could be a little bit better? And then how do we combine those two things to do what's best for us? We're still a developmental program, different than the NFL. We still, I had 21 high school kids in spring practice this year that are still trying to figure out, what is a stance, right? So we're developing differently than they are in the NFL. So just to say, just be just like they are in the NFL, probably not realistic, but there's components to the NFL that we can start to tap into that I think would serve our players better long-term, not only this season, but throughout their career.
Building on that developmental conversation, when you got the job, did you have a conversation with your staff, or Coughlin in particular, about you're going to develop offensive linemen out of high school? Because with as many holes as you had to plug or got good elite players who left, a lot of programs would have gone in the portal to do that.
Yeah.
You're bringing in more homegrown guys. How critical is that in that particular position group to develop?
Yeah, I think it's important in that, we've recruited pretty good here the last 4 years, and not just the O-line, but a lot of positions, and other positions maybe not so well. And we've utilized the portal like a lot of schools have to fill needs. We haven't tried to build our roster through the portal. We've tried to fill needs in the portal, and we just haven't felt like we've had those needs at the offensive line. We've recruited it well. Coach Flood is a great teacher. He's a great coach. We've got good continuity in that room. We've got good leadership in that room. And so I think one of the natural things, I was asked this earlier, people are going to say, oh, we're going to be a young football team this fall. We're not necessarily young. We've just got some new faces, guys who have been in our program, who've been working on their craft, who have been developing, and now it's their opportunity. They're not necessarily young. These are guys in their 3rd and 4th years in our program that now it's their time to compete and to show what they're capable of doing. And part of that for us is to live through maybe some of the growing pains that we just don't have the continuity that we've had the last couple of years. But there's still a lot of good players that if we felt like they weren't good enough, maybe we would have gone into the portal. But we felt like we had more pressing needs that we needed to address, and that room was going to be good enough for us to compete at a high level.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks,
All right, y'all. Thank you.
Appreciate it.